Some said children were out of the question. Well, here I am, a mother of 2 boys. Some said I couldn't handle business life. Well, I've interviewed over 100 CEOs and counting. Some said I wouldn't be able to write a book on mental health. Well, here it is, available wherever books are sold. I'm Aparna Piramal Raje, and I'm happy, thriving, and bipolar. I'm here to say that you can live with a mental health condition, even something as serious as bipolar disorder, which takes you very high and very low, and learn to thrive with it. Read Chemical Khichdi and find out how I hacked my mental health, and perhaps how you or someone you know can also hack your mental health. Join me in a conversation on a subject that affects all of us.
Thank you for that warm welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, a very special welcome to the Piramal and Raje families and our YPO guests. Good evening and welcome all to this special occasion, the launch of Aparna Piramal Raje's new book, Chemical Khichdi. My name is Radhika Piramal, and I'm Aparna's younger sister. Thank you for being here. We are here today to discuss mental health, Aparna's mental health, but also all our mental health. COVID has been a life-changing experience for many of us. We have experienced feelings of isolation, claustrophobia, paranoia, fear, loneliness, anxiety, and depression over the last 2 years. But what we have faced in the last 2 years is something that Aparna has been living for the last 22 years. Her own personal pandemic inside her mind has existed since her early adulthood. I feel that Aparna's book is just right for these times, as more and more of us are ready to discard the stigma and silence around mental health. We now realize we cannot afford to brush our mental health issues under the carpet anymore. This is an extremely important conversation to have, but it's a difficult conversation. Our mental health. There's great naivety and many misconceptions. Each and every one of us could find ourselves with a temporary change in mental chemistry, which could be triggered by stress at home, at work, a physical issue, an illness. We may not recognize it and hence be completely unprepared when we or our loved ones could be in a crisis. Aparna has not only survived being bipolar, but she has thrived despite her very challenging condition. Our hope is that her story can inspire many others to learn how to manage their mental health condition, whatever they may be, so that all of us can lead complete, loving, and fulfilling lives. I'm so proud of Aparna's brave quest to shine a light on mental health through sharing her own story. She has written an open, funny, terrifying account. I'll start by reading an excerpt from the book, which I'm very proud of this book, which I'll follow with an explanation of bipolar disorder, which is a very serious mental condition, as I mentioned before. Only 1% of people have it. I'll end with some stories of our lives growing up and how we learned to deal with her condition. Here's an excerpt which opens chapter 5. It's a journal entry written by Aparna describing her own behavior during one of her manic episodes. January 2013, Mumbai. I am lying on a carpet on the floor in my sister's guest bedroom, trying to sleep. I have given up on the bed. It has given me no respite. Radhika and Amanda come in to check on me at intervals. The next morning, I go down to my mother's flat in the same building and spend my day cleaning and sorting piles of books. It keeps my body occupied without asking too much of my mind. When too many thoughts take over, I crouch in the guest bathroom and record them in my voice recorder, only to delete them later. Mom, Radhika, and my husband Amit update each other on my progress through phone calls and taking turns to be with me. Back home, my mother-in-law Ai, my father-in-law Baba, and Amit are taking care of the kids and the home. We are very fortunate with our household staff. Each one of them has been with us for years and has a vital role in keeping the household going, whatever the weather. My maternal rustic nanny, Champa Devi, and my versatile cook and housekeeper, Ramu, are particularly adept at managing the kids and their routine in my absence and ensuring they are not disturbed. Within a few days, I'll be back. It sounds a bit crazy, right? Speaking to yourself in the bathroom? Well, maybe she is a bit mental. We use this word so carelessly in India. Experts define bipolar through 2 broad descriptions of the manic phase and the depressed phase. In the manic phase, it's common to experience feelings of heightened energy, creativity, and euphoria. In a manic episode, you may talk a mile a minute, not sleep for days, and be hyperactive. You may also feel like you're all-powerful, invincible, or destined for greatness. In the depressive phase, the patient experiences all the classical symptoms of depression, including hopelessness, emptiness, lack of motivation, lack of drive, purpose, or even lack of wanting to live. The causes of bipolar disorder are not completely understood, but it often appears to be hereditary. The first manic or depressive episode of bipolar disorder usually occurs in the teenage years or early adulthood. The symptoms can be confusing. Many people with bipolar disorder are not diagnosed or they are misdiagnosed, resulting in unnecessary suffering. Since bipolar disorder tends to worsen without treatment, it's important to learn what the symptoms look like. Recognizing the problem is the first step to feeling better and getting your life back on track. So say the experts. And I can identify with this confusing part of bipolar. The personality change is so subtle at first. It's like when you know someone close to you is lying. You know it, but you don't want to know it. Like something is happening, you don't want to know to it. It's a tough moral call when your sister starts to exhibit personality traits that are new and somewhat disturbing. Was this who she was becoming as an adult? Maybe the world changed her. Was it the effect and strain of my parents' divorce? I honestly thought her personality was going wrong. I didn't know this was a medical condition. And for me, this was a big blow, because a major problem, because Aparna was and is my big sister and best friend. She has been my role model my whole life. The ideal, overachieving, exceptional older sister. Caring, affectionate, thoughtful. We shared our room until I was 16 and she was 18 and she went to Oxford. And I missed her a lot when she left. Growing up, I would pile on to her and her friends, and to her credit, she always allowed me to tag along, which is usually not so much fun for the older sister. She led the way for me to follow in academic achievement from an early age. She was the deputy head girl of our school, J.B. Pettit. I was no way popular enough to be the head girl. I tried, but there was no chance. She's the reason I'm competitive and ambitious. I have to run hard to keep up with her, and especially because I don't really want to fall far behind. Her intelligence and drive led us both to Oxford, then on to Harvard Business School for our MBAs. As my big sister, she was always there first to show me how everything is meant to be done. A great advantage for me, and she made every effort to help me learn from her experience and avoid common mistakes. This is why when in her mid-20s, when she had her first, what we came to call her episodes, it was terrifying to see my intelligent, well-spoken, sensitive sister turn into a person I just did not recognize. It was alarming and confusing. She also resisted proper medication for over a decade, which is a whole long story for another time. So the first few times Aparna had an episode in her early 20s, we managed by taking her out of the city to escape to some isolation and seclusion of my uncle's house in Alibag, where she would not embarrass or hurt herself by meeting anyone. We would take her phone away from her. This is where my mother and I, along with a few trusted and supportive friends, would spend time at the beach, help ride out the storm that inhabited Aparna's mind. Jennifer Netharwala and Soumya Lashkari, thank you. Your friendship is worth gold. A fine line presented itself as us wanting to trust Aparna, but yet knowing we absolutely could not trust her. She would have nonstop energy for days. We couldn't keep up with her. We would have to take shifts. In order to manage her energy, I once challenged her to a race on the beach. I knew she would start strong, but collapse. So I said, okay, come on, who's going to reach that boat first? And she just took off. And I'm jogging slowly, and then she collapsed, and I aram se caught up to her. She was physically exhausted. Chacha and Chachi, I don't know if I've ever told you how grateful I still am, for the sanctuary that you provided. Words cannot express my gratitude. Aparna would have stream of consciousness conversations with herself for 2 or 3 days, or sometimes 1 or 2 weeks at a time. These took her on the journey of the mind that was beyond reality. For the most, I could not join her in her babble. I would just simply listen in incredulity and frustration at her unrealistic plans and fantastic schemes that she would hatch to save the world. For 24, 48 hours at a time, she would not sleep or rest. Meanwhile, I in particular, would get more and more exhausted. And this confusing periods would come into our lives, usually at a time of stress for Aparna. Sometimes as often as every 6 months, sometimes not for 2 years. We experienced also good periods of stability, so-called normalcy, punctuated by these stressful 2 to 6 week periods. I was also extremely naive of her depression as a reverse side of her mania. The mania is a crash, and the depression is a dead and silence after that crash. It was devastating for me to learn of Aparna's experience with depression, which even I did not fully know until I read her book. I never knew, actually, about her struggle with wanting to live until I read the manuscript last year. And this mystery of mental health has revealed itself after 20 years, and she's written a book, even though I'm one of the 3 people who are her primary caregivers. And if I didn't know fully, then how can I help her? Now I realize I was unable to help in the depression side of things. Reading the book has made me much more sensitive and understanding. I would like to end with a quote. Until lions have their own historians, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter and not the lion. I say this quote for 2 reasons. Firstly, my mother, who's here with us, is a historian. She's a lioness, proud of her 2 cubs, and she is a lion's historian. Second, my sister is a brave lion to share such a personal story. A great problem in our society is our silence. We are always happy to share good news, but we are terrified of sharing our problems. When it comes to the issues that plague us, if we remain silent, we remain alone. If there's one thing I've learned in my life so far, it is to ask for help. What is the point of having experts if we don't listen to their guidance? And what is the point of having family if we don't have their care, support, and unconditional love? Like myself being a lesbian, or Aparna having bipolar disorder. As a family, we struggled for so long because we were afraid to share our complete stories. Now, Aparna and I are both out in the world. It has taken us 2 decades to understand Aparna in a much better way. It's unfortunate it took us so many years, but I really hope that this book helps others avoid some of these common mistakes and saves time for the people that need some mental health help. And actually, that is all of us, especially after the pandemic. Now, without any further ado, it's my honor and privilege to invite the star of today's show, my older sister and best friend, Aparna, onto the stage to launch the book, Chemical Quickly. Please, Aparna.
Thanks, Rads. You know, the sibling bond is actually the longest bond we have in our lives. And I'm just blessed to have one who is so supportive. Somebody outside who's a very famous author told me that, you know, my brother sent one tweet about my book and he thought he was doing his job. So I'm really blessed to have Radhika. I have to tell you something that, you know, for many authors, maybe not for others, but for authors like me, we plan the book launch before we even plan the book. So the fact that we're having this in the Opera House, and so far it's COVID, and I really hope this is not a super spreader event, so I hope you've all got your masks on. You know, so it's a dream to be here, to have you with us. I really want to thank you with so many other commitments that you have, and every other place that you could be, that you are here with us today. I can't actually see you very well, but I'm going to ask you to start with a quiz. Those who were there at my previous book launches know that I like to start with a quiz. I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions, and all you need to do is raise your hand. Okay, so first question is, do you know anyone in your immediate circle who was diagnosed with cancer and was open about it? Could you just raise your hand if there was someone in your immediate circle? And really, you know, the spotlight's on me, but I think I see a lot of hands. So the second question, okay, now yes. Can you just do that again so I can see it? Yes, so it's pretty much everyone in the auditorium. And I would now like to ask you, do you know anyone with a mental health condition in your immediate circle who was open about it? And there are far fewer. Now, cancer, unfortunately, is really tragic. It has claimed my own uncle in our family. But the fact is, the chances of actually developing a mental health condition in our country is higher than the chance of getting cancer. And so that's, you know, a fact that we just don't know much about. And the issue is that mental health is a bit like vitamin D, right? So we all started taking these vitamin D tests a few years ago, and we found out that we were deficient, and we all needed more sunlight, and so we started treating it. But that sunlight is what mental health needs. And that is why we're here today. And this is part of the sunlight. And it might seem like this huge vanity project, right? To write a book about your life and to have all this media and to be in the Royal Opera House. But really, I want to just share one message that I got from somebody who I was just exchanging emails with for work, but I've never even met this person. And he said, at 5:45 in the morning, he messaged me. And he said that I've read your book. I couldn't stop reading it. I'm going to give it to somebody who wrote a book on depression. I'm going to give it to a friend who's going through a personal trauma beyond explanation. I'm going to give it to somebody who lost her mother and who's going through anxiety. I'm going to say sorry to my wife who had postpartum depression and I couldn't understand what she was going through. And you know what? I'm going to give you a playlist because you said you like music, and so I hope you start your day with a playlist, which was really nice of him. But that's the reason why I'm doing this, because I think those stories are few. It's not that memoirs have not been written in India. Actually, even in bipolar, there's some beautiful memoirs that have been written, but I think we don't have so many solutions, and this is what I've tried to provide. So this book really is for everyone. Like Radhika was saying, that only 1% of people have bipolar. So you might be thinking, why should I read a book on bipolar? And one of my own family members who's close to me said, I'm so proud of you. You've written this book on bipolar and on mental health, and you're going to help lots of people. And I said, you know what? It's going to help you. And she looked at the cover and she said, me? I don't have a mental health problem. And I said, no, actually it's about mental wellness. It's for, only 1% might have bipolar, but 100% of people need mental wellness. So this is all about hacking your mental health and wellness. And I have to tell you that even though it's not a prescription, I did have this book vetted by top psychiatrists in India, in the UK, and in the US. So the advice that you're getting is definitely sound from that perspective. And more than really a book or a handbook, it's really an invitation for you to think about what could work well for you and for you to have that conversation with somebody who is close to you. So let me tell you a little bit about my journey. So a few months ago, I had dinner with a school friend whose teenage son is on the autism spectrum. And she told me that, my son sees movies in his head. And honestly, my face just lit up, and I said, finally, someone like me. I mean, autism and bipolar are different, but there's some similarities over there. And so I said, okay, he sees movies in his head. What kind of movies? So she said, well, there are lots of animals in them, and then they usually die in the end. And I said, well, this is not dissimilar. There's, in my movies, there's drama, there's action, there's comedy, but there's a lot of sexual violence also, there's trauma, and it can be really difficult. And the challenge with these movies in your head is that you are totally disconnected from the outside world when all of this is going on. And these movies are so engrossing, just like she said about her son, that you can't pay attention. And just imagine being in a dark cinema, okay, and you're watching this, and whether it's entertaining, whether it's scary, whether it's traumatic, you're fascinated by it. And there's imagery, there's soundtracks going on, and somebody knocks on there and says, have you taken your meds? When did you last sleep? How many hours have you slept? And they're saying it out of concern, but honestly what you're thinking is, I am going to throw something at you because there is so much going on inside my head that I can't actually concentrate on a thing that you've said. And my favorite bipolar joke, if you get it, is that the trouble with being bipolar is that you can't really take your mind off the problem. You just sort of have to figure it out. So bipolar is serious. I mean, I make jokes, but it is in the same realm of something like schizophrenia, right? And I have the more severe version of it. It's in the form of the mania that Radhika described, and also some of the depression. And there is something very, very raw and intense and very passionate and very energetic inside me. It is that tigress who I know that's there in me. There is that sea monster which is there in me. It's a different form of energy, and actually, I'm only coming to terms now with what that expression of that energy is. But it is very raw, and to be honest, I'm surprised that there are parts of this book that my family even let me publish. You can have a look at it. So anyway, then my friend asked me, what shall I tell my son about the movies and how to deal with them? So I said, look, I can only give you my advice, which is you ask him who has got the remote control for that movie. Is that remote control in his hand, or is that remote control in somebody else's hand? And that is exactly what my mentor, Koza Merchant, asked me once. And he said, he sat me down when I had given him 50 pages of writing in 5 days and so many voice notes. And he said, are you going to live in your head or are you going to live in the real world? And you know, after you get manic, you get so dejected and disappointed because all these grand schemes that you've had, none of that has happened and you're just so down. And I didn't even know what he meant by that, but I was listening to him. So I'm going to just show you some pictures of my journey because I think that'll help to understand. Could we have the first picture, please? This is actually a picture of me when I was manic. Last time I was manic, which was 4 years ago. And this is, I've been stable since then. And if you can see and you look closely, you know, you can see that I haven't slept, there's a strain on my face. And you know, people say mania is about a high, but this is not a picture of somebody who is happy. You can also see how much an ally Radhika is, and this was actually taken, I think, by Nandini, my cousin, who's also been a big ally. So then I want to show you another picture. This is me when I was depressed back in 2013. And you know, really many of us, especially women and particularly Indian women, we do not have the luxury of sitting in our pajamas and being depressed. You know, we have children to look after, we have responsibilities, and you know, I would always urge the media when they are trying to portray pictures of what a manic person looks like and what a depressed person looks like, to look at the subtleties of it and not to have the typical pictures that you see, because this is a picture of somebody who is very quiet and very withdrawn and just trying to figure out, you know, do they want to live life at all? And the next one, please. And this is my normal personality, right? This is what I'm trying to say, that personality and illness are two different things. This is a picture that was taken before my, you know, manic episodes began, back when I was a student. And I think this is what my personality is, a little vibrant, a little bit hatke, you know, wearing these yellow sunglasses. And the next one is, this is me now. You know, just a few months ago, I'm posing with my bookcase at home. I'm kind of always hoping that somebody from Vogue is going to come by and do an interview with me. So this is me, right? Now, so how did this transition happen, right? So this, the next one, please. And the transition really is what I call the 7 therapies in the book, and I'll talk about them. So these 7 therapies is something that I've evolved and written about. And I said that the first therapy really is the medical therapy, okay, which is the drug therapy and the psychotherapy, and it is essential. You just cannot survive without it. Radhika talked about it and how difficult it was for us to get onto it, but it really is essential. Love therapy, which is the role of the caregivers in the family, and I think I don't can add anything more than what Radhika has said, but particularly Amit, Radhika, and Mom have just been my primary caregivers, but we've had so much extended family over the years who've played a role. And then I would say lifestyle therapy. And by lifestyle therapy, I mean sleep, nutrition, exercise, and also play, right? To have a little bit of joy in my life. I mean, I just love playing with my children, playing table tennis or playing other games with them, or just being involved in their Lego and other things. But without these 3, the medical, the love, and the lifestyle, you just cannot get a handle on your condition. And unfortunately, in our country, people are struggling with just these 3. The maximum messages I get from people are just to say, oh, you know, can you just, you know, I'm only taking the meds and nothing's happening. But just taking the meds is not enough, it's essential, but you have to have this troika, as I call it, right? And I'll just give you an example of how these 3 go hand in hand. So just this week, right, just now as in real time, I knew this week was going to be a very emotionally charged week for me. I may lose sleep, I'll probably get anxious. So I decided that I'm going to work out every single day, which I had been slipping on my workout. So I said, I'm going to make workout the priority, and I'm going to fit work around it. I'm going to have an extra session of therapy with my therapist. And, you know, I was emotional in that session, and I was a bit tearful because it's been such a long journey. But that's also what allows me to be kind of happy and pretty chilled about the whole thing today, right? And that is what therapy does. It makes you feel so much better. And then I spent a lot of time relaxing with Mom and Radhika, and of course, most importantly, Apollo, the dog. And then I think I did the best thing possible, which is I avoided IPL as much as possible, because I think that's the best thing for my mental health, to avoid that. And then I took a pill to help me sleep, right, which is prescribed by my doctor, and it's safe, and it's completely going to give me that peace of mind. So this is these 3 therapies that are just helping one cope, right? But as I said, most families and individuals struggle with just these 3. But while they are the necessary and they are that protective scaffolding that is required, they are not sufficient to thrive. If you want to go from surviving to thriving, then you need to have more therapies, okay, which is what I have experienced, and I've been fortunate enough to experience that. So the first is, of these 4, is the role of allies. Okay, these are people who are a little bit distant from the family and who can be there also as a form of empathy. So I spoke about mentors, I have networks like my book club or my writers club, and very importantly, I have my daily download friends. I mean, these are people whom I download my whole day with every day. And I think, in today's day and age, we have friends that we can call at 2 in the morning in an emergency, but do we really have friends that we can download on a daily basis? And it's not like we're sharing like deep and meaningful conversations. We're just literally saying, what's happened in the day, and we're in touch with each other. So I think they really keep me peaceful and joyful. And related to that, I think that we live in a country which I call the chatterbox nation. Do we really need to be the chatbot nation? I have never used apps for mental health. I know there are lots out there, and there are a lot of people in this industry, and there are a lot of money going into this industry, but really we are the chatterbox nation, and can we not use mental health and technology to build communities that can support each other? So that was one of my thinking in the role of the allies. The second big game changer for me in terms of being able to thrive was being able to share my situation at work. And I shared it with Sukumar, my editor at the Mint, with Seema Chaudhary, who was my boss at the Mint, and also with Pramad Sinha at Anant. And they were so open about it, and there was no choice. I had to share it because I was slipping up at work. So I had to tell them that this is part of who I am, this is part of the package. And because they accepted it and they accommodated me in roles which would work for my condition, I've been at the Mint for 14 years now. I've been teaching at Anant for now about 4 years. And this is actually one area which I think India can do a lot on, is workplace mental health. I totally intend to be an advocate for that, and if you would like to engage with me, I would love to hear from you. So allies and workplace, and then the very important part is the inner work, the conversation that you have with yourself, right? Why are the movies coming into my head in the first place? What are the triggers? As Radhika said, is it stress? What is it? And here I've had literally, I started maintaining a journal 10 years ago. I've had a 10-year conversation with myself to understand what is success for me? What is happiness? What is my identity? Whose validation am I seeking? What is the narrative of my life that is going to make me feel fulfilled? And these are the questions that were really triggering a lot of my episodes, and I think to some extent I have resolved them, and I'm in a much, much better place. My scorecard is a lot more internal than it used to be versus being really external. And the last one is spiritual therapy, okay, which is one of the ways of saying it is the means by which I had the conversation with yourself. Like, not many people would want to open up a journal and write. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can always read any text, any spiritual text, religious text that you find really, that speaks to you, okay? There was actually one shlok from the Bhagavad Gita that changed my life. I'm a part-time professor, right? So I'll give you homework and I'll tell you, you can look up the book and find out which shlok it was and whether it resonates with you. But because I'm a nice professor, I'll say it's in chapter 8, so it'll make it easier for you and you can look it up and see if that's good for you. But yeah, I think that, this was a really important part of my journey. Now, it might sound like a lot, right? 7 therapies, I'm struggling with 1 or 2, how do I do that? And the other point, you might think that, it's very easy for all of us sitting in the opera house to say, okay, we come from a place of privilege, we have the resources, it's easy enough for Aparna to write this book, she had the time to do it. But I'll say one thing, these therapies apply to everyone. The context may change. Okay, if there is a woman who's suffering from depression in rural Rajasthan, her context is entirely different from mine. I completely acknowledge that. But the role of the family, the role of community, the need for medication, the need to have lifestyle, the role that spirituality can play and religion and faith can play in her life are pretty much the same as it would be for my life. So I think what I'm really asking you to do is to examine your own context and see how this could work for you. And also the other thing is the book has a lot of references to people at the bottom of the pyramid or doing work for people in the bottom of the pyramid who can also access mental health. So I think we have a long way to go as a country. I'm not denying that at all. But I think it's really important to recognize that some aspects of the way to look at these conditions are universal. And what we obviously need to do is to look at how to deliver access to people in a more scalable and sustainable way. So a couple of just last things, I would say on happiness. People say that happiness is a choice and a decision, and I think for everyone in this room, it is clearly a choice and a decision. But it is also it is a daily practice. It's like a yoga practice. It's something you need to practice to be good at. I firmly believe that. It's a state of mind when you're living with hope. And some say, some people have told me that chemical khichdi is an act of courage. But more than an act of courage, I look at it as an act of vulnerability and of resilience. Like I said, I didn't want to be just waiting around and, sitting around for the kids to come home and just moping in bed. That's not the life I wanted for myself. And I was very clear that I wanted to live the life that I wanted to lead. So I really think that just because you have a vulnerability, it doesn't mean that you have to be a victim of that vulnerability, whatever that vulnerability is. And somewhere perhaps down the line, you even have to, if not surrender to that vulnerability, but maybe even learn to make peace with it or even learn to love it. So please read this book to have a conversation with yourself, with the people you love. If you want to chat with me, I'm always around. I'm talking to strangers every night at 9 in the night, so I can definitely have a conversation with you. It's not a problem. And I would like to ask you, if mental health is a team sport, whose team are you on? Whose daily download friend are you? Whose ally are you? Whose colleague are you? Whose caregiver are you? Because even today, I'm a primary caregiver of the people in my family. I may have a mental health condition, but that doesn't exclude me from that role. And I think we all play those multiple roles. So on a lighter note, my publicist, my amazing publicist, Pratik at Penguin, has given me lots of targets to achieve. So I'll leave you with a joke. And it says, "Jahan na paunche bail gaadi, udhar hi paunche Marwadi." Okay? So I'll add to that and I'll say, "Jahan na paunche Marwadi, udhar hi paunche chemical khichdi." Okay? It is my dream to have this book translated into Indian languages. For that, it has to resonate in English. I know many of you have been waiting for your copies on Amazon. We've had like a litany of problems in getting them. But please go out and get another one and give it to someone who you think would benefit. Thank you so much for being here. It's really been a privilege.
Thank you all. I hope you are enjoying the discussion so far. If you think this is interesting, you have to check out the book, really. So it's now my pleasure to please invite our esteemed panel onto the stage. So I'll start by requesting Aparna to return to the stage, and Richa Roy, our moderator, Mr. Ajay Piramal, and Mr. Kinger, to please make your way from either the sides or the audience onto the stage. You'll be handed mics, and Richa will do the introductions. Thank you so much, Richa.
Okay, that phase has entered our life, and my lame joke has entered our lives in the post-pandemic Zoom world. But there is another silent pandemic that's been raging, and that is of mental health conditions. 14% of all Indians have a mental health condition, and that is probably underdiagnosed. This could have a $1 trillion impact on the Indian economy in a 20-year period, according to the UN. But, as a wise woman has said, statistics don't change people's minds, stories change people's minds. So we have Aparna's story. It's an epic story of triumph, of her spirit, her struggles, and her sensitivity. And through that, she has distilled lessons which are valuable to other people with mental health conditions, practitioners, their caregivers. It could easily have been a project of self-aggrandizement. It could have been a vanity project, but it is instead a project of service, a project of giving. I think it's going to shape a conversation, spark a movement, and change people's lives. And ultimately, to me, it's a book about what poets and philosophers, priests, and people like you and me are thinking about, constantly grappling with. What gives life meaning? How do we find purpose? How do we find happiness? And we have a stellar panel to help us interrogate some of these questions. Mr. Ajay Piramal, the chairman of the Piramal Group, a philanthropist and a trusted partner of the Indian government on developmental projects, and a deep thinker about spirituality. Mr. Narendra Kinger, a psychotherapist and psychologist practicing in Bombay for 35 years, the founder of Talk to Me, a mental health NGO seeking to make mental health accessible and affordable to all. Aparna, of course. My name is Richa Roy. I'm a lawyer and a close friend of Aparna's. Have had the honor of witnessing her journey. So let's start, Aparna, with the quote that your book starts with. It's a funny line. It says, "There is a pleasure sure in being mad, which none but madmen know." And then there's a slightly more somber line. "Tread all the powers of darkness down and win the well-fought day." To me, this is emblematic of the rest of your book and also of your life and your approach, where you treat an issue of gravity with levity, with a lightness of touch, with wit and humor. Why do you do that? And how do you do that?
I don't know how I do that, but why I do that, I think I saw a video on YouTube by Swami Chinmayananda, and he said that life is a tragedy for those who feel, and life is a comedy for those who think. Now, somebody who feels a lot, then I said, I don't want to be living in a tragedy. I'd rather be living in a comedy. So, but of course, what he's referring to is there's a deep, science of Vedanta and body, mind, intellect, and understanding the difference between the two. And I just think that if you can take life seriously, but you don't take yourself so seriously, because we're just tiny, right? Like we're just so small, right? So you have to kind of take life seriously and things that happen in life, but not take yourself seriously has always been my philosophy.
Right, no, absolutely. And I think Indian spirituality also has grains of this. And I'd love to hear from you, Mr. Piramal, on this, because I read in the book that you gave Aparna her first copy of the Gita. The Gita is a scripture that talks about disciplining the mind, calls the mind a naughty monkey in places, that same sort of playful strain. What do you think is the role of spirituality and scriptures in mental well-being and kind of dealing with darkness?
I think we should just appreciate where the Gita was spoken. The Gita was spoken first by the Lord in the midst of a battlefield to a young person, Arjuna, who was not even 30, and who was the most skilled archer of his time. And yet, normally when you have a book which is written on spirituality or where you speak about spirituality, it would be probably in the Himalayas or somewhere in the forest. So why was it spoken right in the midst of all this? I think there's a purpose behind it. The purpose is that it is a lesson for all of us. What Aparna said actually in the introduction, it struck me. It's not for the 1% who are affected, it's for all of us. So this is a book which was given for all of us. And what was the condition of Arjuna, which almost all of us go through sometime in our life? He was scared because he saw such a big army on the opposite side. He was depressed. He had just given up. He surrendered his arms. And then he was finding a lot of reasons, and he gave a lot of logic. Nothing of it was really, it was logical, but it was all, behind it was the fear, it was the depression. And then at the end of it, Krishna brings him out of that depression. So in some ways, it relates to all of us. Every day we go through it. And the other thing to remember is in this, that though it is the Lord himself who is the charioteer of Arjuna, or who is his best friend, but Arjuna has to make the effort to come out. It's not that you can sit back and say, okay, the Lord will look after me. And second, as important is that he goes through a lot of difficulty. It's not an easy battle. So in spite of all this, I think to me, that's a big lesson for all of us. And if I see Aparna thriving today, it is just another example of what has been taught in the Gita.
Wow, the Gita is a mental health text. That's so wonderful. But I've also seen
it is the world's best anti-depression manual, I think. Seriously.
Actually, there are so many times it is the most optimistic thing. He assures you of so many times, and he also says, do not grieve. That is the standard line in the Gita. At least more than 50 times it's said that you have to be optimistic.
Right, and it's fascinating the kind of uses you can put the Gita to. I've seen you use it in negotiations, in business negotiations, so I'm looking forward to your book on that topic. Aparna, I'd like to kind of double-click on the title a little bit, if we may. Chemical Khichdi. So you're acknowledging the role of brain chemistry and physiological roots to mental illness. You say that when you first got your diagnosis of bipolar, they de-linked your personality from the mental health condition. I think you also say that there are psychological triggers that lead to chemical imbalances. Can you tell us about the interplay between the medical and the psychological?
Yeah, I think that if I haven't slept for 5 nights in a row, then there's going to be a chemical imbalance unless I address it. But if what is keeping me awake for 5 nights in a row is a psychological issue.
Absolutely.
But I think the title also has something to do with Munna Bhai also, to be honest. But he talks about chemical locha.
And khichdi is kind of a nourishing thing.
Yeah, khichdi actually can be nourishing, so it's both ways. No, but I think the title was to say, it was an acceptance of the fact that there is a chemical imbalance, and this is not something that's,
It's not a personality
It's not
defect.
a personality thing, yeah.
Absolutely. Mr. King, I'd love to bring you in as a practitioner. We see that it took Aparna 10 years to first start medication. Why do you think people struggle so much to go to a psychiatrist or to go to a psychotherapist, which is another important pillar of the medical treatment?
So before I answer your question, I think to me, khichdi is food for the soul. So I think chemical khichdi is in a way, I think it's connected to your mind-body connection in that sense. So I think really it's a very wonderful title. So to answer your question that why do people take time or why does it take so long for us to reach or seek help, and especially mental health issues, I think there's a huge issue of stigma in our country. We are afraid of being mocked, we are afraid of being made fun of. When we don't understand something, when we have complex issues at hand, it's easier to just bury your head in the sand and not look at it. So I think in that context, there's a whole thing of shame, stigma, what will people say, things like that. So that's one of the first aspect of why people don't seek help. Second role, I think, which is covered in Aparna's book, which is in a positive way, that her family actually supported her. I think in a large number of families, sometimes the family doesn't support somebody who's going through a mental health condition. So I think in our Indian context, and we live in a family system, the family has a huge responsibility to support people who are going through mental health conditions. So if you have a supportive partner, you have a supportive parent, you have supportive friends, you have a supportive teacher, I think it's easier to seek help. The second part is lack of mental health awareness. So a lot of us don't really understand. So mental health is sometimes called the invisible illness, okay? So if you have fever, you can touch your forehead and you can actually measure it's 103. But the bipolar mood swing that we talk about, or the depression, etc. Of course, there are tests which we measure, but many times people don't really understand. This word depression is used commonly in day-to-day language. At the same time, it's a medical illness. We need to understand that. And the third part, I think, is that when we look at a lot of young people, we are actually taught to be self-reliant. From childhood, you are told that, take care, grow up, be a man, take care of yourself, so on and so forth. So I think we actually, a lot of young people hesitate to take help, and that's the third part. So stigma, wanting to be self-reliant, wanting to use your own resources and not really lose self-esteem. And the third is, as I said, that we really don't have too much of mental health awareness in our country.
Right, right. I hope, khichdi is on the menu tonight. I don't know if it is, but since you talked so much about family, I thought maybe, Mr. Piramal, you could tell us a little bit about how your family rallied around Aparna, how you got past the societal stigma of dealing with this condition.
So I must say that in our family, to a great extent, I think we have enough confidence in the family ourselves that we are not if we think we are doing right, then it's not what we need for public to accept or not. So for instance, I mean, I know that from very, very early days, my brother, I mean, you know, if you come from a traditional Marwari family, if you even go outside and get married to a non-Marwari, people will look at it. But he got married to a Gujarati, and it was like my father asked him to do it. So in all ways, I think we've never worried about what others think, as long as you think you're doing right. And that is why I think the credit has to actually go much more, I would say, to Aparna and to Amit, that they could accept this and speak about it. You know, we are all in some ways, we are family, but we are on the sidelines. It is these two who are really affected the most. Yes, her mom and her sister, but really day to day they are. And I think it's a great courage to do that. And I think, you know, Aparna talked about vulnerability. According to me, you can only be vulnerable if you have self-confidence. Yeah. If you do not have, you'll never be vulnerable. And because you're vulnerable, I think it's a big strength, and the family rallies around you even more. So that's how I look at it.
Absolutely. I think you're a big source of confidence, and I know Amit and his family also are. Aparna, another thing about your title, and at this point I'm a little worried people are going to think I've only read the cover page and the title. But you know, you talk about hacking mental health. You make it sound deceptively simple. Because I think what you do is actually something very deep. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. But really what you're doing is examining your life. You bring a radical transparency, but also authenticity and self-awareness. What were some of the therapies that you used that help you do that? What were some of your learnings and unlearnings about sort of happiness, purpose in this journey?
I think one thing I'll say about this journey is I trusted a lot of people. You know, I know people who've gone through a lot of trauma and all that, and they may not have trusted a lot of people. So I think only when we talk about vulnerability, only when you trust someone with your vulnerability, otherwise they don't know what's going on, right? So unless you tell them that you've got something going on, then you can receive a lot of help. So when you talk about this whole journey, then I got so much advice from people. You know, I got different opinions, perspectives. So then you kind of then pick and choose what really works for you, because then you have a lot of sources. I mean, it could get confusing also, but you do have a lot of perspectives to choose from. And I think, Richa, I think one thing I'm really blessed with is this gift of writing. Writing is really a gift. Yeah. Because if you have that, then you can bring a lot of rigor to your thinking as well as empathy. You know, especially I don't want to be kind of, and you're a millennial, so I don't want to be, you know, disrespectful to millennials, but there's this whole thing about be kind to yourself, you know, and take care of your mental health. And I think, of course, you should be kind to yourself, but be rigorous with yourself also.
Absolutely.
You know, you have to have a mixture of rigor and empathy. And all my years of design thinking and interviewing CEOs like my uncle here have, you know, made me kind of come to this with a perspective of rigor and empathy both. You know,
accept yourself and expect more from yourself.
Yeah, and understand and analyze, like really be honest with yourself as to let's say, whose approval are you seeking in life, you know, Absolutely. At the end of the day. Who are you trying to make happy? So, and keep asking yourself those questions until you find an answer.
No, absolutely, and I think that leads me to another question for Mr. Piramal. So, Aparna, now you have a multi-hyphenated identity, but I know you struggled with identity a lot. Mr. Piramal, you have said in the past, my business is not my identity. I think it takes a lot of courage to say that. I think for a lot of people, their identity lies in that one elusive position or salary or material possession. How do we go about finding our identity and our sense of purpose in a world that's giving us such wrong cues? Material acquisition rather than sort of other kinds of spiritual fulfillment.
So I think we have to go to the basic. What is really the purpose of life? I mean, why does anybody live? Actually, it is that it is the pursuit of happiness. Even the US Constitution begins with the pursuit of happiness.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
But there is a difference in that pursuit of happiness and what our scriptures say. The happiness is not from outside. The happiness is from within. And therefore, for that happiness to be within, you have to have a heart which is full of love, full of happiness, and you have to seek it within. So even in identity, you have to look within, because your identity changes. think of it, I mean, forget profession. You have an identity when you're growing up as an identity of being a child. Then you become a mother, then you become a wife, you
It's
become
always
whatever.
relational.
It is always changing. Or look at my own business. I had early on started as identity of textiles.
That's right.
But I gave up textiles. So, I mean, there are many people who at that time questioned me that why are you giving up textiles? That's your identity. But did I feel less because of that? No. Then I went into pharmaceuticals. I gave that up. I started something else. So identity is not determined by what outside is, what others think, but from within. And that is where spirituality as they call the Satchitanand, but
yes.
That's the identity. And purpose is another big thing. I think you have to have a larger purpose in life than, okay, I will become a CEO or my wealth will become X or Y. The purpose has to be really doing well in life, doing good, and making a difference to the world. If you do not have that purpose, you will always fall short. And in identity, suppose today you're a CEO you come on the cover of whatever business today, tomorrow you fail, you'll
Absolutely.
feel depressed. So it is all within. If you are strong within, through times you will go.
Absolutely. It's attributes and actions and not sort of an external thing. On a lighter note, I call you a serially successful entrepreneur for that reason. You've been in such diverse fields. Mr. Kinga, I'd love to interrogate that question of demand and supply a little bit more. Do people not go to psychiatrists because, you mentioned stigma and so forth, but how can we empower people to demand better care? And how can we improve the supply? How can we make sure that there are better resourced, better qualified medical professionals to help when we need it?
So my answer to that question is that actually, 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 5 Indians have a mental health condition. So that's 20% of your population. So there are 500 people over here. There's 100 people having a mental health condition. I don't know how many of them actually seek mental health treatment over here. That's one part. So one is that when people start seeking help or people start going to professionals, the need for excellence or the need to kind of improve the quality of services becomes an integral part of it. So I think it's very important that people accept that there's a mental health issue, and when they start seeking help, that will happen automatically. So for example, there's a classical example that many years back, we used to travel by trains, and aircrafts were few and far between. So the number of pilots in the country was very few. And today with the airline industry growing, suddenly there's a huge number of pilots coming into the field. So if the demand for mental health services picks up, I think the excellence will also improve. The second part is, in India, unfortunately, we've been functioning more as individual islands of excellence. So there are a huge number of professionals who are exceptionally good at their work, but we all work as isolated individuals. And this whole thing of collective effort or working as a team is little less. So I think if that happens, I think there'll be a huge change in the situation.
Right. No, I think I have a slightly different take on demand and supply, only in that people don't have the ability to even seek the demand. I don't think they're kind of aware or have the resources to seek good care. So I think it's an unfortunate situation. Aparna, of course, you had the privilege to do that. It took you a while. But I'd love to talk to you a little bit about privilege. You acknowledged that early in the book, and throughout the book, you did that earlier this evening. You had the privilege of resources, you had the privilege of even time to address your condition and deal with it. How do you think people without that privilege can navigate their mental health journey?
Actually, I think there are some interesting models that are now being set up. So for example, I think what Mr. Kinga is doing is really amazing with a walk-in center for mental health in an industrial estate. I mean, we meet in an industrial estate in Mahim, where he's got a center where anybody can come in and have therapy. Or for example, there's a rural model called Atmiyata, which is where the community is an expert in mental health itself, and the community has champions, and then they help they help each other, and when there are situations that are more difficult, they escalate them. So I think then there is something like Therapize, which is also in the book, which is aimed at, not aimed only at young people, but really looking at making therapy very accessible to first-time therapy seekers. So I think there's actually quite a lot happening generally in this space when I started doing my research, but let's not kid ourselves that we have millions of people who have a problem. Yeah. So, all these little startups that are happening here and there, I don't know if it's, if it can really happen without a much, much bigger, scalable, sustainable, and I don't think there is one silver bullet, because what I've seen really is it took me 7 therapies, right? So, and somebody else may have 3, 4, 5, whatever they might have, different things that might work for them, but you need a kind of holistic perspective that is quite nurturing.
No, I think this is why your book is an act of service, because you list so many resources, and you've talked about, at length, about, the various things that people can access, whether you want medical support or psychiatric, psychotherapic support or other kinds of things, apps even, not chatbots, but, apps that can be helpful.
Yeah, I think just one thing I will say is that I don't see mental health as a distinct from life. I think this is what Mr. Kingar and I would both agree on. It is totally interwoven with life, okay? If you are poor, if you have, if you're struggling with unemployment, that's a mental health issue. Alcoholism, that's a mental health issue, right? Gender issues, domestic violence, these are mental health issues. So for just to sort of restrict it to a very narrow understanding or definition of the world.
I completely agree with what Aparna is saying. I think we have stages of life, right, from childhood to old age, and at different stages of life, you can have different mental health issues. So we have to take a, lifespan approach rather than looking at specific illnesses and disorders. So absolutely. I think that's the key over here.
And some of the biggest triggers are socioeconomic,
yes.
Right? So I think that there is that. But yeah. Mr. Kingar, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the work you do with Talk to Me? You're working with marginalized communities, and you're making mental health accessible to them. Tell us some of your learnings from that, and also tell us about what are the policy changes you'd like to see to make this more ubiquitous.
So thank you. I think this is a great platform Aparna has given all of us to talk about mental health. So I think a lot of people who are here should kind of become ambassadors for mental health. I'm looking forward to that. So when we started Talk to Me in 2017, and it took us 2.5 years to establish a physical center, that's just one center, but I think like Aparna said, there are millions of people across the country who need these kind of support systems. Absolutely. So, but the idea behind this was that I have experienced that a lot of people who cannot afford therapy, one of the key deterrents of not going for therapy, counseling, or seeking mental health treatment is because of lack of finances. So I think we took money out of the equation.
Wow.
So when you take money out of the equation, you're saying that you can come and see what we have to offer. The second thing was that we also created a model that there are people who don't want favors, right? So there are people who say, I can afford 300 rupees. I can afford 500 rupees. So I don't want a favor, I don't want free service. I will pay. So we created a pay-as-you-can model. So when so they don't feel obligated to us, or they don't feel demeaned. They don't feel that we are taking. they are taking advantage of this. The third learning was that actually people think that you're just sitting in a chair and you're listening to them, but it's hard work. You sit in a chair for 12 hours or 8 hours and listening to people with different problems is not easy. So my third key learning was that as therapists, we also need to really take care of ourselves. Yeah. That's the third. And fourth, I think, is the community approach. I think just sitting in an office is not good enough. We need to reach out to the community. So we started doing projects outside with, say, juvenile delinquents, with the police, with orphanages, with women in rescue homes. Because I feel that, these are the key aspects which have been largely neglected. So we want to work with communities where if I work with one person, and there's a multiplier effect. So I work with one orphan, he gets a job, he takes care of himself, he has a family. So actually we are giving them a very positive take on life. So I think it's more about doing good and making sure that there's a multiplier effect of that.
Yeah, actually, I just want to talk about the multiplier effect. I also support an NGO called Kranti. I think some of them are here today. Honestly, anybody who thinks my story is great is should just go and listen to a Josh Talks on Kranti. Okay, these girls are daughters of sex workers. They have had incredibly horrific stories in their lives, and they are all rebuilding their lives, and therapy has been a huge part of it. So, you know, it's because, and they're doing this by themselves. So I think these are just the incredible stories that you see in our city, and those are the ones that really need to be celebrated.
So I want to just add, your second part of the question was, what can we do?
Policy changes
or what policy
you'd
changes?
like to see?
I think mental health, first of all, should be made an integral part of insurance. So I think, you know, just like you have physical health, insurance cover,
Yes.
mental health should be covered. I think that's a big lacuna in our system. That's one. The second thing, I think state and central government should definitely put in more money into it, which I think the process has started, but I think needs much more. And here is where individuals, corporates, HNIs come into the place. So when the government is not giving it, you do it for yourself. Because I feel that in every organization, if I'm saying that 1 out of 5 has a problem, and if you have 1,000 people working for you, there's 200 people with a mental health condition.
Right.
And if you work with them, the productivity, the profitability of the company goes up. So I think if companies and corporates start investing money, it will be a win-win for everybody.
Right. No, that's very valuable. And Mr. Piramal, we're going to kind of lean on you to get this message to the government to get policy changes started. But I'm just going to ask you and Aparna about gratitude. Gratitude is actually something that's deeply rooted in our spiritual tradition. It's about shedding the ego, having a sense of grace and a power larger than yourself, and shedding hubris. How does gratitude affect your sense of personal well-being?
First of all, I think we must recognize, sometimes we don't even appreciate why we should be grateful for. And I think during the pandemic in COVID, you realized, and I don't know how many of us realized it, but you know, one of the biggest issues when the pandemic was at its peak was that you could not get oxygen. And so many people were struggling and passed away because of oxygen. Can you imagine the gratitude that we should have to the environment, that every second we are now breathing? So, I mean, these are small things, but look at it. To be born as a human being, if you believe in the whole reincarnation, then you need thousands of, or hundreds of thousands of births to be born an individual, to born a human being. The fact that we have the power to discriminate and we don't only do what an animal does itself is so much gratitude. And if we have that feeling of gratitude, a heart filled with gratitude, I think is happiness. Now look at Aparna's case. Somebody could have said to her, she would have said, oh, why has this happened to me? But she's, I think, grateful for what she's done. And therefore, she's a happier person. So gratitude leads to inner happiness. Gratitude leads to being humble. Humility. Because you know that you are there because of somebody else. And humility leads to devotion. And so I think in that sense, it's a very, very good thing. So that's how I believe. And there's so many things you have to be grateful for. Even in the worst of times, you are grateful for many, many things happening.
I'll just say that, you know, I think when you're depressed, like there's a black hole, right? And you need something, that ladder to help you come out of that black hole. And I think gratitude is that ladder because it's the beginning of finding a few steps out of that black hole because you can say, you know, that I've got like something to be grateful for. So I think it may not solve the entire black hole, but it's the beginning of that ladder.
I think gratitude itself is a gift, the ability to feel gratitude. So one last set of questions for you, Mr. Piramal, and you, Mr. Kinga. I firmly believe this book is about much more than mental health. It's about happiness, purpose, and identity. Why do you think that people should read a book about bipolar? And what does happiness and success mean to you?
So I think the reason why you should read the book for bipolar is that it's really not on bipolar. I think that's what was explained by Aparna in the beginning. It's for all of us. And, you know, all of us go through difficult times. I think there is nobody in the world, at least I know, who's not had challenges. If you tell me the most successful person, the most powerful person, everybody goes through it. And this just helps you to come out of a situation. How do you address it? You may not have bipolarity, but you may have some other issue. It's just like, as I said, the Gita. The Gita is there for all of us. You relate it to the way you want to relate it. So that, to me, is the reason why a book like this, comes out. And, look at Aparna, I have to say, thriving. If I look at Amit, her husband, look at her children. She's been able to bring up a really good family. So in spite of all the challenges, I think they're doing well. So that just shows that this book is meant for all of us.
So I think I largely, fully, completely agree with what he just said. So it may be a book about bipolar, but I think it's a life lesson. So when it's her struggle with her condition, and as Mr. Piramal was saying, that each of us have certain struggles in our life, and we all need to understand. So when she spoke about taking help from somebody, leaning on a friend, reading Gita, spirituality, midnight calls, family support, children being a stress buster, I think these lessons apply
Universal.
to all of us. So I don't think it's just about bipolar, it's about trying
Life.
to maybe look at all the positivity that we may have in our lives along with our difficulties. Okay, so most of us, the brain has a tendency to focus only on the negative.
That's right.
And we tend to downplay the positive. I think my lesson, I read the book, Aparna, by the way. So my lesson,
I also didn't just read the cover.
so she was sure I won't read the book, but I read the book. I think
You had a wedding in the family, so.
so the lesson, I think, is that we all need to learn from each other. And I really think it's a very, very wise book. So I think it's a great lesson for all of us.
Absolutely.
Thank you both of you.
We're out of time, but I'm going to, okay, if we had a rapid fire, the gift was going to be a dedication in Aparna's next book or a character being named after you. But we don't have any time for a rapid fire. So you have to name characters after.
We can do a rapid fire.
Okay, very quickly then. Mr. Piramal, one misconception about the Gita that you think is prevalent that you'd like to correct?
People think it's a book of a Hindu text. I think it's a universal text.
That's beautiful. And one lesson from the Gita, Aparna didn't tell us the shlok that changed her life. I have some idea which one it is, but one lesson from the Gita you want everyone to
I'm
know.
also going to be like Aparna. Go to the Gita, chapter 9, shlok 22. That is what has changed my life.
Okay. I know that it's on your office door as well, and Aparna has written about it as
No,
well.
so let me know. It's slightly different. So it really says that the Lord gives a guarantee, promise to everybody concerned that whoever is a true devotee, to that person I will protect what that person has and provide what that person needs. So if you have that belief, then through any difficulty you can go through, because he will protect you and provide you what you need.
That's really lovely. Is one attribute of Aparna or one lesson from her book that you want everyone to imbibe?
I think it is really how do you conquer, and don't be, really you can conquer any challenge and thrive. I think that is the main thing.
Absolutely. It's an epic story, just like Odyssey or the Mahabharata or
Not
something
epic.
like that. Right.
Not an epic.
And since we're in the Royal Opera House, one song that you think can calm the mind, or a bhajan that you think can calm a mind?
I believe in the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which is the simplest for anybody, and it is said that even if a dog hears it, that dog also gets calm. So
He pointed
I
you to
believe in
it.
that.
We had to
Aparna,
get a
in the book.
dog reference in.
If you talk about Apollo, then we have to talk about it.
Okay, Mr. Kingar, resources or awareness, what do you think is more critical for mental health?
At this point of time, awareness. Resources will come when awareness comes.
Great answer. Okay, celebrities talking about mental health, do you think that's good, or do you think that there should be a note of caution?
So honestly, I had mixed feelings about coming here because I thought people may think it's a PR exercise. But I think it's wonderful that if 500 people can take out time and come here, I think nothing better than that. So I think anybody and everybody
Well,
talking
I'm not
about
a celebrity, I think.
I think that's what Aparna's takeaway from this was that. But
More and more humble.
the gratitude is helping. And since you have read the book, one therapy or lesson from Chemical Khichdi that you would like to use with your patients?
Not losing hope, making sure that you accept that you're going through a difficult condition, connecting or reaching out to the person who can actually offer that help, and kind of staying with the positive mindset.
That's lovely. Okay, Aparna, this is a slightly controversial question, but I still want to know. Can a mental health condition be a superpower or a gift?
Yeah, you should now, I'll tell you more. You should read the most wise thing in my book, which is the letter from my childhood friend Hetal, and that will answer all your questions.
Penguin is going to be proud of you. Like all answers are either in my book or in another book. Seek the source. Okay, one word to describe the writing process for you.
It gave me a lot of purpose, not one word, but really it was imbuing purpose. It kept me going through the lockdown.
I thought the word would be catharsis, so I think it's quite
I don't think it was
similar.
cathartic. I think the poetry that I wrote was cathartic when I wrote it. The journal was cathartic when I wrote it. But I think writing the book was more an act of discipline and labor, but it gave me a lot of purpose.
Fabulous. That's beautiful. Okay, one thing that you have left out in the book that you'd like to tell us now, or something you could change about the book?
If I left it out, then I wouldn't share it now.
Tell us a secret.
That was a trick question.
Exactly. No, but also poetry or journalism, if you had to choose.
Poetry.
Wow. And since we're in the Royal Opera House, Lata Mangeshkar or Nina Simone?
Asha Bhosle.
Okay, that was lovely. You have to name a character after Dr. Kinger, after Mr. Piramal, and dedicate the book to, apart from sort of your family, dedicate it to yourself, I think, because it's a tie, three-way tie. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Richa. Thank you, Aparna. Thank you, Mr. Kinger. Thank you, Chacha. Thank you all. So we've had a lot of nourishment of our minds. And don't worry, nourishment of our bodies is coming soon. But between that, let us have some nourishment of our souls. So I'm now delighted as we come to the conclusion of our evening. Our last segment is a musical segment of our evening. And please join me in welcoming Del Raz and Clifton onto the stage. Music is Del Raz and Clifton, please come. Music is very important to Aparna. These are two songs that are very meaningful and beautiful to her. They will be performed by Del Raz. She is a singer, songwriter, and actor. She has worked with renowned musicians across India and starred in many musicals, including Arya, Aladdin, and many more. Clifton Rodericks is a pianist, composer, and producer of music for over 30 years. He's known for his sensitivity and brilliance. They will perform these two songs which are close to Aparna's heart. They have offered her moments of comfort and solace over the years. We hope that you find them as beautiful as she does. Please give Del Raz and Clifton a warm welcome.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. have to be afraid of what you are. There's an answer if you reach into your soul. It's sorrow that you know will melt away. And then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on, and you cast your fears aside, and I know that you survive. When you find that hope is gone, look inside you and be strong, and you finally see the truth, that a hero lies in you. It's a long road when you face the world alone. No one reaches out a hand for you to hold. You can find love when you search within yourself. The emptiness you felt will disappear. And then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on, and you cast your fears aside, and I know that you survive. When you feel like hope is gone, look inside you and be strong, and you finally see the truth, that a hero lies in you. Lord knows dreams are hard to follow, but don't let anyone tear them away. Hold on, there will be tomorrow, and in time you'll find the way. And then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on, and you cast your fears aside, and I know that you survive. When you feel like hope is gone, look inside me and be strong, and you finally see the truth, that a hero lies in you. That a hero lies in
With your permission, may we play one more song? Yes, please, one more song. And then after that, there will be some light refreshments on the lawn. Please, one more song.
like a small boat on the ocean, sending big waves into motion. Like how a single word can make your heart open. I might only have one nudge, I can make an explosion. And all those things